Story number 1. Nightfall at Big Basin. The trail through Big Basin State Park had always been my sanctuary, a place where the chaos of daily life faded into the whisper of the pines and the rhythmic crunch of my boots on the gravel path. As an avid hiker and someone who thrived on solitude, I found solace in the expansive wilderness that stretched out before me. But that autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest plunged into twilight, I realized that some legends are better left untouched. I had planned this solo trip meticulously, hoping to push my limits and capture the perfect sunset photograph from the highest vantage point in the park. The weather forecast had been clear, promising crisp air and vibrant foliage, a perfect backdrop for my adventure. With my backpack securely fastened and my camera slung over my shoulder, I set off just as the golden hour began to wane. The trail was familiar, winding through towering redwoods and dense underbrush, each step bringing me deeper into the heart of Big Basin. The sky painted itself in hues of orange and pink, the fading light filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns. Birds chirped their evening songs, and the scent of damp earth and pine filled the air, creating an intoxicating blend that only nature can offer. As I approached the clearing near the summit, the sounds of the forest seemed to grow quieter, the usual symphony of nocturnal creatures taking on a hushed tone. I paused to adjust my camera, capturing the last rays of sunlight as they kissed the treetops. It was then that I heard it, a faint rustling, almost imperceptible, coming from the dense foliage to my right. I turned, heart pounding, trying to locate the source of the noise. The forest was vast, shadows dancing between the trees as night began to assert its dominance. Probably just a deer, I muttered to myself, attempting to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest. But the rustling didn't cease. Instead, it grew louder, more deliberate, as if something or someone was inching closer. My pulse quickened, and I reached for the flashlight in my backpack, flicking it on to illuminate the path ahead. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but the silhouettes of ancient trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that fear was often the mind's way of interpreting the unknown. Determined to continue my hike, I resumed my trek towards the summit, the unexplained noise fading behind me. The temperature had dropped noticeably, the crisp air now biting against my skin, urging me to quicken my pace. Halfway up the trail, I decided to take a short break, settling onto a rocky outcrop that offered an unobstructed view of the entire park. The lake below mirrored the star-studded sky, its surface calm and reflective. I pulled out a granola bar, savoring the simple pleasure of a well-earned snack. As I munched, the forest around me seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick and almost oppressive. Then, without warning, a loud crash echoed through the trees, jolting me from my reverie. I sprang to my feet, scanning the darkness with my flashlight. The beam landed on a large mass moving swiftly between the trees, a shadowy figure that stood out against the night. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering despite my attempt to remain calm. The figure stopped, and for a moment, we locked eyes. It was impossibly tall, easily over 7 feet, with broad shoulders and a hunched posture that suggested immense strength. Thick, matted fur covered its body, blending seamlessly with the surrounding shadows. But it was the eyes that held my attention, bright, almost luminescent, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from its throat, the sound vibrating through the air and reverberating in my bones. Panic surged through me as I realized I was face to face with something, or someone, beyond my understanding. The legends of Big Basin spoke of creatures lurking in the depths, but I had always dismissed them as mere folklore, stories told to scare off trespassers. Now, standing on the precipice of belief and fear, I understood that some mysteries were real, and some legends carried a grain of terrifying truth. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the creature. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot by a mix of fear and awe. The creature took a step forward, its movements deliberate and heavy, each footfall sending vibrations through the ground. "Please, leave me alone," I whispered, hoping my plea would reach whatever consciousness lay within those luminous eyes. But the creature didn't respond. Instead, it let out another growl, this one more menacing, and lunged towards me with terrifying speed. I turned and bolted, sprinting down the trail with adrenaline fueling every desperate stride. The sounds of its pursuit echoed behind me, a relentless reminder of the nightmare I was now living. Branches whipped against my face as I ran, the forest blurring around me. My breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale a struggle against the cold night air. The howls and growls of the creature seemed to grow louder, more urgent, pushing me to flee further into the wilderness. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of a nearby overlook. The trail now nothing more than a winding path lost in the darkness. Collapsing onto the ground, I looked back, eyes wide with terror, but the creature had vanished, swallowed by the depths of the forest. The silence that followed was deafening, the oppressive fear lingering like a shadow in my mind. I sat there for what felt like hours, heart pounding, legs trembling, trying to process what had just happened. The realization that the legends were real settled in, a cold certainty that gnawed at my sanity. The forest that had once been my refuge was now a place of fear, haunted by a presence that defied explanation. Determined to document my experience, I pulled out my notebook, jotting down every detail I could remember. The creature's towering stature, its piercing eyes, the guttural growls, it all needed to be recorded. A testament to the night I encountered the unimaginable. As I wrote, the first light of dawn began to break, the colors of sunrise painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, offering a semblance of hope after the night's horrors. I made my way back to the trailhead, the morning sun warming my chilled skin, but the fear still lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness that dwelled within Big Basin. The encounter had changed me, transforming my skepticism into a wary respect for the unknown. I knew I would return, not out of desire, but out of a need to understand, to uncover the truths that lay hidden in the depths of the wilderness. Big Basin State Park remained a place of beauty and mystery, its ancient trees holding secrets that few dared to explore. The legends would continue to grow, fueled by stories like mine, a reminder that nature's wonders were not always benign, and that the wild held truths far more terrifying than any man-made fear. As I drove away, the memory of those bright, piercing eyes and the menacing presence that hunted me through the night stayed with me, a haunting echo that would forever change my perception of the world around me. Story number 2. Whispers in the Shadows of Mount Shasta. The first time I heard about the strange howls near Mount Shasta, it was through a conversation at the local gear shop in Redding. Most dismissed it as another tall tale spun by overzealous hikers or the aftereffects of too many cold beers. But when my friends Emily, Mark, Lisa, and I decided to embark on a weekend camping trip deep into the heart of Mount Shasta, the stories lingered in the back of my mind like a persistent shadow. Mount Shasta had always been a beacon for adventurers and mystery seekers alike. This towering peak, cloaked in perpetual snow, stood as a sentinel over the sprawling wilderness below. We were drawn not just by the promise of pristine trails and breathtaking vistas, but by the allure of uncovering the truth behind the whispered legends. Our journey began on a crisp Friday morning. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth as we loaded our gear into Mark's rugged 4x4, the vehicle's tires gripping the gravelly roads with ease. Emily, ever the planner, had meticulously charted our route, ensuring we stayed on the established trails and avoided the denser, more treacherous parts of the forest. As we trekked deeper into the wilderness, the landscape transformed. The dense forests of Douglas fir and western red cedar gave way to open meadows dotted with wildflowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the dark, towering trees, The serenity of the surroundings was both comforting and unnerving, the silence broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird or the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. By late afternoon, we had reached a secluded clearing near a small, crystal-clear lake. The water mirrored the sky above, reflecting the fading hues of sunset in a mesmerizing display. We set up camp, the air growing colder as the sun dipped below the horizon. As night fell, the forest seemed to come alive with sounds, the chirping of crickets, the croaking of frogs, and the gentle lapping of water against the shore. We gathered around the campfire, its warmth a welcome respite against the encroaching chill. Emily shared her collection of local legends, her voice steady yet filled with an undercurrent of unease. The most recent stories spoke of unexplained howls echoing through the night, sounds unlike any known animal, accompanied by the sighting of glowing eyes watching from the darkness. People say it's a creature unlike anything they've ever seen, Emily explained, her eyes flickering with both fear and fascination. Some call it Bigfoot, others think it's something more sinister. Mark chuckled, attempting to lighten the mood. Come on, Emily, you're not seriously buying into those ghost stories, are you? Lisa, always the skeptic, added. It's probably just a bear or some other wild animal reacting to our presence. The forest is full of surprises. I tried to shake off the creeping unease that settled in my stomach. After all, we were seasoned outdoorsmen, familiar with the sounds and sights of the wilderness. But as the night deepened, the howls Emily described began to resonate through the trees, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. Did you guys hear that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, his expression serious. Yeah, sounds like it's coming from out there, he said, pointing towards the dense forest beyond the lake. We sat in tense silence, the howls growing louder and more frequent, each one carrying an eerie resonance that seemed to penetrate the very air around us. The campfire flickered, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on our minds. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the night, followed by the heavy thuds of footsteps approaching our campsite. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to see through the darkness, my flashlight darting back and forth in search of the source. Out of the shadows emerged a towering figure, its massive frame covered in thick, matted fur that seemed to absorb the scant light available. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, reflecting the firelight like burning embers. The creature stood still for a moment, its presence overwhelming, before letting out a guttural growl that reverberated through the clearing. Run! Mark shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me to my feet. We need to get out of here. Panic surged through me as we bolted from the campsite, the creature in hot pursuit. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees towering like silent sentinels blocking our path. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig heightened our senses, the fear of the unknown propelling us forward. We stumbled through the underbrush, branches clawing at our faces and snagging our clothes, the snow crunching under our frantic footsteps. The howls and growls of the creature echoed behind us, a relentless reminder of the danger we faced. My mind raced, searching for any semblance of rationality amidst the chaos. Over here, Lisa called, pointing towards a narrow trail that promised a quicker escape. We followed her lead, the path winding steeply upward, the cold air biting at our skin. Our breaths came in ragged gasps, the adrenaline making every step both a battle and a necessity. As we climbed, the sounds of the creature seemed to diminish, replaced by the oppressive silence of the night. Just when hope began to flicker, a shadowy figure blocked our path, its eyes glowing brighter than before. We froze, our hearts sinking as the reality of our situation pressed in. This is it, Emily whispered, her voice trembling with fear. There's no way past it. The creature let out a final, bone-chilling roar, its massive form looming over us. For a moment, time stood still, the world reduced to the three of us and the embodiment of our worst nightmares. Then, without warning, turned and disappeared into the darkness, the howls fading into the distance. We stood there, breathless and shaken, the forest returning to its deceptive calm. The adrenaline slowly ebbed, leaving behind a profound sense of relief and lingering fear. We didn't speak for what felt like hours, the gravity of what had transpired settling in. Eventually, we made our way back to the campsite, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon and dispelling the shadows that had haunted us through the night. The forest seemed different now, its beauty tinged with an undercurrent of menace. Packing up our gear, we left Bluff Ridge with a newfound respect for the legends that inhabited Mount Shasta. The experience bonded us in ways we couldn't have imagined, a shared trauma that left an indelible mark on our lives. The footprints in the snow and the lingering echoes of the creature's howls were reminders of the night we faced the unknown and survived. Years have passed since that fateful weekend, but the memory remains vivid, the fear and adrenaline still coursing through my veins whenever I think back to the encounter. Mount Shasta stands tall and enigmatic, its mysteries as vast as the wilderness that surrounds it. The legends may continue to grow, but for those of us who have witnessed the truth, they serve as a testament to the untamed and unpredictable forces that dwell within nature's embrace. If you ever find yourself venturing into the heart of Mount Shasta, remember our story, respect the legends, heed the warnings, and tread carefully, for in the shadows of the redwoods and beneath the watchful eyes of the mountains lies a presence that watches, waits, and guards its domain with a ferocity that can turn myth into a living, breathing nightmare. Story number 3. Claw marks at Big Bear Lake. The night I encountered the creature near Big Bear Lake is etched into my memory with a clarity that time has failed to diminish. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where the air is sharp and the moon casts long, eerie shadows across the winding roads of the Sierra Nevada. My friends and I had decided to take a late-night drive, seeking solace and adventure beneath the vast, star-studded sky. We were heading back from a weekend getaway, our spirits high and our conversations light. The drive through Big Bear Lake was always mesmerizing, the water reflecting the moonlight like a sheet of liquid silver. As we approached the outskirts of the town, the road became narrower, flanked by dense forests that seemed to close in around us. The darkness was punctuated only by the occasional flicker of headlights from passing cars, creating an illusion of movement within the stillness. I was at the wheel, my hands steady on the steering wheel, while Jake navigated and Sarah managed the music. Emily sat in the back, her head resting against the window, eyes fixed on the shadows that danced between the trees. It was a serene scene, one that belied the terror that was about to unfold. Around midnight, as we cruised along a particularly secluded stretch of road, the familiar sounds of the night enveloped us, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the rhythmic hum of the engine. The tranquility was almost hypnotic, allowing my mind to wander freely. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a massive shadow loomed in front of our car. My heart skipped a beat as I slammed on the brakes, bringing the vehicle to an abrupt halt. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the heavy breaths of my friends and the rapid thudding of my own heart. Before me stood a towering figure, easily over 7 feet tall, covered in thick, matted fur that seemed to absorb the scant light available. Its eyes, large and luminescent, glowed with an otherworldly intensity, reflecting a mixture of anger and sorrow. The creature's presence was both terrifying and strangely melancholic, as if it bore the weight of countless untold stories. Jake was the first to react, his voice trembling as he stammered, "What the hell is that?" Before any of us could respond, the creature let out a guttural roar that resonated through the still night, shaking the very ground beneath us. Panic surged through me, adrenaline coursing as I reached for the gear shift, preparing to drive away. But the creature moved with alarming speed, a blur of motion that defied its massive size. It lunged at the front of the car, its immense hands striking the hood with bone-crushing force. The impact sent shivers down my spine, the vibrations reverberating through the vehicle. Glass shattered as shards flew towards us, cutting through the air like deadly projectiles. The car's horn honked frantically, a futile attempt to ward off the impending threat. Emily screamed from the back seat, her voice piercing the chaos. "Tom, do something." Desperation clawed at my mind as I fumbled with the gearshift, my fingers numb from fear. With a trembling hand, I shifted into reverse, hoping to put some distance between us and the creature. The engine roared to life, tires screeching against the icy pavement as I accelerated away. But the nightmare was far from over. The creature kept pace effortlessly, its movements unnervingly fluid for such a colossal being. It leapt onto the roof of the car, causing it to swerve violently as I struggled to maintain control. The windows shattered under the force of its grip, and I could feel the raw power emanating from its every movement. "Jake, steer left. We need to lose it," I shouted, trying to mask the fear in my voice. Jake took the wheel, his hands slick with sweat, as he maneuvered the car through the narrow bends of the road. The headlights cast frantic beams into the darkness, illuminating glimpses of the forest that seemed to close in around us. Every turn felt like a race against an unstoppable force, the creature relentlessly pursuing us through the unforgiving wilderness. The car's speed became a blur, the lines between reality and nightmare merging as we plunged deeper into the night. My mind raced, thoughts jumbled and chaotic, searching for any semblance of rationality amidst the terror. The sound of the creature's heavy breathing and occasional roars echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of the danger that was never far behind. As we neared the end of the road, a sense of hopelessness began to take hold. The creature was still on our tail, its presence an ever-looming threat. The trees seemed to whisper ominously as we barreled through, the forest a dark maze that offered no escape. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, muscles straining as I fought to keep the car steady. Then, as if sensing our desperation, the creature made one final, horrifying attempt to stop us. It surged forward, its massive form pressing against the windshield, forcing the car to skid violently. The impact sent me sprawling against the seatbelt, the world around me a whirlwind of chaos and fear. For a moment, everything went dark. When I came to, the car was stranded in the middle of the road, smoke billowing from the engine, and the creature had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. My friends were in varying states of shock, the gravity of what had just transpired sinking in. The windshield was shattered, the hood bearing the deep claw marks that were the only evidence of the night's terror. We sat in stunned silence, the only sounds the distant calls of nocturnal animals and the crackling of the smoldering engine. The reality of the situation began to dawn on us. We had narrowly escaped a nightmarish encounter, one that would haunt us for years to come. "Are we okay?" Sarah finally broke the silence, her voice shaky but relieved. I nodded, still trying to steady my breathing. "Yeah, I think so. But we need to get help." Gathering our courage, we attempted to start the car again, but the engine sputtered and died, leaving us stranded in the unforgiving wilderness. The cold bit into our skin, a harsh reminder of the night's events and the peril that still lurked in the shadows. We decided to make our way back on foot, the road eerily silent except for our own footsteps crunching on the snow-covered ground. The forest seemed to watch us, the towering redwoods casting long, dark shadows that danced with the faint light of dawn. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig heightened our senses, the memory of the creature's pursuit keeping us on edge. Hours passed as we navigated the treacherous terrain, the rising sun slowly dispelling the darkness that had held us captive. Exhaustion set in, our muscles aching and breaths coming in sharp gasps. But the fear of the unknown kept us moving forward. Just as hope began to wane, we spotted the faint outline of Nome on the horizon, the town lights a beacon of safety and civilization. Relief washed over us as we quickened our pace, the promise of warmth and shelter spurring us onward. The forest behind us seemed to recede, the redwoods standing tall and silent as we made our final push towards safety. We reached the outskirts of Nome by early morning, the town bustling with the day's activities, unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded in their midst. Exhausted and battered, we finally found assistance, sharing our harrowing tale with incredulous locals who were quick to validate our story with their own encounters and the evidence we provided. The claw marks on the hood of my car became a symbol of our ordeal, a tangible proof of the creature's existence. The stories of Bigfoot in Bluff Creek took on a new level of authenticity, the legends now intertwined with our personal experience. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memories remain vivid, the fear and adrenaline still coursing through my veins whenever I think back to the encounter. Bluff Creek Cabin stands as a silent witness to our ordeal, a place where reality and legend blurred beneath the watchful eyes of the Sierra Nevada. If you ever find yourself driving near Big Bear Lake on a cold, quiet night, remember our story. Respect the legends, heed the warnings, and tread carefully, for in the heart of the wilderness, amidst the towering pines and the silent whispers of the forest, lies a presence that watches, waits, and guards its domain with a ferocity that can turn myth into a living, breathing nightmare. Story number 4. The Giant by Lake Tahoe. The first time I heard about the giant near Lake Tahoe, it was through hushed whispers at the local gear shop. Most dismissed it as another tall tale spun by overzealous hikers or the aftereffects of too many cold beers. But when my friends and I decided to embark on a weekend climbing expedition, the story lingered in the back of my mind like a persistent shadow. Our group consisted of 5 friends: Jake, the fearless leader; Sarah, the meticulous planner; Mike, always ready with a joke; Emily, the quiet observer; and me, Tom, the skeptic who needed a bit more convincing. We had all heard the stories, tales of a towering figure lurking in the dense forests near Lake Tahoe, a creature so immense that it left deep footprints in the mud and vanished into the darkness before anyone could get a good look. We set out early Saturday morning, the sun barely cresting the horizon, casting a golden hue over the snow-capped peaks. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and the earthy aroma of the forest floor. Our destination was a remote trail known for its challenging climbs and breathtaking views, a place where few dared to tread. As we ascended, the trail became steeper, the trees growing denser, their branches intertwining overhead to form a natural canopy that filtered the sunlight into soft, dappled patterns on the ground. The sounds of civilization faded, replaced by the rhythmic crunch of our boots on the gravel and the occasional call of a distant bird. By midday, we reached a clearing with a panoramic view of Lake Tahoe, its azure waters shimmering under the bright sun. We took a break, sharing stories and laughter, the camaraderie strengthening our bond. It was then that Jake pulled out his camera, eager to capture the beauty around us. "Imagine getting a shot of that giant," he joked, pointing towards the thick forest that bordered the lake. "That would be epic." I laughed, shaking my head. "Yeah, right. Probably just a bear or something." Sarah, ever the planner, checked her map. "We should keep moving. There's a ridge up ahead that offers a great vantage point, perfect for some solid photos." As the afternoon sun began to dip, we continued our climb, the trail winding its way up the ridge. The light softened, casting long shadows that stretched across the landscape, adding an air of mystery to the already enigmatic forest. Nightfall approached quickly, the temperature dropping and the forest growing quiet. We decided to set up camp near a rocky outcrop, the perfect spot to rest before tackling the final stretch the next day. The fire crackled to life, providing warmth and a comforting glow against the encroaching darkness. As we sat around the fire, Mike regaled us with exaggerated tales of encounters with the giant, his animated gestures making everyone laugh. Emily listened quietly, her eyes reflecting the flames, while Jake and Sarah discussed our route for the following day. I found myself staring into the fire, contemplating the day's adventures and the lingering presence of the stories we'd heard. Around midnight, A heavy silence settled over the campsite, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. I decided to take a walk, needing some fresh air to clear my mind. Bundled in my jacket, I stepped into the night, the cold air biting at my cheeks. The forest was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and the subtle movement of wildlife. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting eerie shadows that danced among the trees. As I wandered deeper into the woods, the path became less defined, the underbrush thickening with each step. Suddenly, I heard it, a series of heavy footsteps approaching, each one thudding against the soft earth with an unsettling rhythm. My heart raced as I strained to see through the darkness, but the dense foliage provided little visibility. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until I could feel their presence pressing in on me. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering with a mix of fear and curiosity. There was no response, only the sound of the creature moving towards me. Panic set in as I realized I was alone, miles away from the safety of the campsite. I turned to run, my breath quickening, but the forest seemed to close in around me, the trees towering like silent guardians blocking my path. In the faint moonlight, I caught a glimpse of movement, a towering figure, its form obscured by the shadows, yet undeniably massive. It stood still for a moment, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness, before turning and disappearing into the depths of the forest. I stood frozen, unable to tear my eyes away, before finally snapping back to reality and sprinting towards the trail. I reached the edge of the forest, the campsite just a short distance behind me. My friends were still asleep, unaware of the nightmare that had nearly claimed me. Gasping for breath, I struggled to calm my racing heart. The image of the giant seared into my mind. The next morning, we gathered our gear and prepared to continue our climb, the events of the night still haunting my thoughts. As we ascended the ridge, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the trail ahead. We reached the summit by noon, rewarded with an unobstructed view of the entire lake and the sprawling forest beyond. "We should take some photos here," Sarah suggested, pulling out her camera. "This spot is perfect." As we set up our equipment, Jake noticed something unusual, a set of large footprints leading away from our previous campsite, deep and well-defined, unlike any bear or deer tracks we had seen before. "Guys, check this out," he called, pointing towards the trail. We followed the footprints, our curiosity piqued. They led us deeper into the forest, away from the safety of our base. The trail became more rugged, the snow crunching under our boots as we pressed forward. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence enveloped us. The sounds of the forest dimmed to a distant murmur. After what felt like hours, we reached a secluded clearing, the ground muddy from recent rains. The footprints ended abruptly at the edge of the clearing, leaving no trace of where the creature had gone. We stood there, exchanging uneasy glances, the stories of the giant now more real than ever. "Maybe we should head back," Mike suggested, his usual bravado tempered by the eerie atmosphere. But Jake was determined. "No way, this is the best lead we've got. We need to find out what's out there." As we delved deeper into the clearing, the temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the frigid air. The trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with snow, creating a natural barrier that seemed to trap us in a frozen nightmare. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled, the trees swaying violently as if caught in a fierce storm. A deafening roar echoed through the forest, the sound so powerful it felt like the earth itself was protesting our intrusion. My friends froze, eyes wide with fear as the source of the noise became clear. There, standing in the center of the clearing, was the giant. Its massive frame towered over us, muscles rippling beneath its thick, dark fur. Its eyes glowed with an intense, otherworldly light, and a low growl rumbled from its throat, sending shivers down my spine. "Run!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with panic. We turned and fled, our footsteps pounding against the frozen ground as the giant pursued us with terrifying speed. The forest seemed to transform into a maze, the trees twisting and turning to block our escape. Every glance over my shoulder confirmed that the creature was gaining on us, his presence a relentless force of nature. We stumbled through the underbrush, branches clawing at our faces, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The giant's growls grew louder, more menacing, as it closed the distance between us. Desperation fueled our movements, pushing us to run faster despite the exhaustion and fear that weighed us down. Suddenly, we burst into a narrow ravine, the walls towering above us, providing a temporary barrier from the pursuing beast. We collapsed onto the icy ground, our hearts pounding in our chests, the sounds of the giant's pursuit fading into the distance. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating, as we lay there, trying to catch our breath. The reality of what we had just experienced settled over us like a dark cloud, the legend of the giant now etched into our very souls. We knew we had witnessed something beyond our understanding, a creature that embodied the untamed power and mystery of the wilderness. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the snow-covered landscape, we made our way back to the campsite, each step a testament to our will to survive. The footprints we had followed were still visible, leading back to the clearing where we had faced the giant. But now, they seemed like a reminder of the night's horrors, a silent testament to the existence of something truly formidable. In the days that followed, we left Bluff Ridge with a newfound respect for the legends that inhabit the wilderness. The experience bonded us in ways we couldn't fully comprehend, a shared trauma that left an indelible mark on our lives. We shared our story with others, hoping to shed light on the truth behind the tales of the giant near Lake Tahoe. Years have passed since that fateful weekend, but the memory of the giant remains vivid in my mind. The towering figure with glowing eyes, the relentless pursuit through the snow-covered forest, each detail a haunting reminder of the night we encountered something beyond our wildest fears. Bluff Ridge Cabin stands as a silent witness to our ordeal, a place where the line between myth and reality blurred beneath the watchful eyes of the redwoods. If you ever find yourself hiking near Lake Tahoe, remember our story, respect the legends, heed the warnings, and tread carefully, for in the heart of the Sierra Nevada, amidst the towering redwoods and the silent whispers of the forest, lies a presence that watches, waits, and guards its domain with a ferocity that can turn the most cherished myths into living nightmares. Story number 5. The Night at Bluff Ridge Cabin. The Sierra Nevada had always been a place of solace for me and my family. The towering pines, the crisp mountain air, and the serene beauty of nature provided the perfect escape from the chaos of our daily lives. So when my wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emma and Jack, suggested a weekend getaway to Bluff Ridge Cabin, I welcomed the idea with open arms. Little did we know, that night would forever alter our perception of the wilderness. We arrived at Bluff Ridge just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. The cabin stood alone, nestled between ancient redwoods that seemed to touch the sky. Its rustic charm was undeniable: wooden beams, stone fireplace, and large windows that offered panoramic views of the surrounding forest. It was the perfect retreat. After settling in, we spent the evening unpacking, lighting the fireplace, and enjoying a hearty meal. The children were excited, eager to explore the woods the next day, while Laura and I appreciated the quiet, the kind that only true wilderness can offer. As night descended, the temperature dropped sharply, and a blanket of silence enveloped us, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the distant call of an owl. We retired to our respective bedrooms early, exhausted from the day's activities. Emma and Jack quickly fell asleep, their breaths steady and calm. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the peacefulness of the night slowly lulling me into a light sleep. But tranquility was short-lived. Around midnight, a loud banging noise shattered the silence. I jolted upright, heart racing, my senses on high alert. It sounded like heavy footsteps, thuds echoing against the wooden walls of the cabin. My first instinct was to dismiss it as an animal, perhaps a bear or a deer, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too menacing. I glanced over at Laura, who was already awake, sitting up in her bed with a worried expression. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, eyes wide with concern. "Yeah, it sounded like something or someone is outside." The banging continued, growing louder and more frantic. I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously made my way to the window, the beam slicing through the darkness. At first, I saw nothing, just the thick forest stretching into the night. But then, a shadowy figure emerged from the trees, its massive frame obscured by the gloom. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was far too large to be any known animal. "Stay inside," I instructed Laura softly, retreating back to the bedroom. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the figure approach the cabin. It moved with an unsettling grace, each step deliberate, leaving deep impressions in the snow. The creature stopped at the window, its eyes reflecting the dim light, glowing with an unnatural intensity. A guttural growl emanated from its throat, sending chills down my spine. I could feel Laura's anxiety and our children's need for safety amplifying the fear within me. Suddenly, the figure began pounding on the glass, the force of its blows causing the window to tremble. Cracks spiderwebbed across the pane. But it didn't deter the creature. It continued its relentless assault, growls turning into roars that reverberated through the cabin. "Emma, Jack, stay here," I instructed, moving to secure the doors and windows as best as I could. Laura and I worked in tandem, our movements synchronized by sheer panic. The children huddled together, clutching their blankets, their innocent eyes wide with fear. Minutes felt like hours as we fortified our sanctuary, the creature's presence growing more aggressive. I could hear it outside, heavy breathing and the sound of claws scraping against the wooden walls. Desperation set in. We needed to find a way to defend ourselves or escape. I remembered the stories of Bigfoot in these parts, tales of a massive, elusive creature that roamed the wilderness, avoiding human contact but fiercely protective of its territory. But seeing it up close was something entirely different. This was no myth. It was a nightmare made flesh. Suddenly, the cabin was rocked by a violent crash as the creature managed to break through one of the windows. Shards of glass flew through the air, embedding themselves in the wooden floor. The beast stepped into the cabin, its hulking form filling the room, eyes locked onto mine with an unyielding gaze. I stood my ground, knowing that any sudden movement could provoke it further. Laura stood beside me, her hand tightly gripping mine, providing a semblance of strength amidst the terror. Emma and Jack cried softly, the sound cutting through the chaos. The creature let out another roar, this time more desperate, almost pleading. Its eyes, once filled with menace, now seemed to convey a deep, unspoken sorrow. I felt a strange connection, a glimpse into the soul of this misunderstood being. Perhaps it wasn't here to harm us, but driven by something beyond its control. "Please," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the creature's growls. "We don't want to hurt you." For a moment, there was a tense silence. The creature hesitated, its growls subsiding into softer, more mournful sounds. Took a step back, I still fixed on me, then turned and retreated toward the window, leaving the cabin as abruptly as it had entered. The door and windows shuddered from the force of its departure, and an eerie calm settled over the room. Laura and I exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of what had just transpired. The children began to relax, their cries fading into the background as the immediate threat seemed to dissipate. We waited in silence for what felt like an eternity, ensuring that the creature had truly left. Eventually, the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, casting a gentle glow over the snow-covered landscape. The forest was still, the only sounds the distant calls of birds and the rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Exhausted and shaken, we sat together, trying to process the night's events. The creature had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the broken glass and our lingering fear. But there was also a sense of relief, a feeling that perhaps we had been spared a fate worse than fear. In the days that followed, we left Bluff Ridge with a renewed appreciation for the fragile boundary between humanity and the wild. The experience bonded us in ways we couldn't fully comprehend, a shared trauma that left an indelible mark on our lives. I often think back to that night, the terrifying yet strangely poignant encounter with the creature. It challenged my beliefs, forcing me to confront the mysteries that still lie hidden in the depths of the wilderness. Bluff Ridge Cabin remains a symbol of that harrowing night, a testament to the unknown forces that dwell just beyond our understanding, and the resilience of the human spirit when faced with the unimaginable. If you ever find yourself camping in the Sierra Nevada, remember our story, respect the legends, heed the warnings, and tread carefully, for in the heart of the redwoods, amidst the silence and the shadows, lies a presence that watches, waits, and guards its domain with a ferocity that can turn myth into a living, breathing nightmare. Story number 6. The Shadow of Bluff Creek. The first time I heard about Bluff Creek, it was through the infamous Patterson-Gimlin film, a grainy, black-and-white snapshot of what many believed was Bigfoot. The footage had become legendary, spawning countless debates and daring expeditions by those hungry for the truth. As a seasoned outdoorsman and amateur filmmaker, I found myself irresistibly drawn to the mystery. So, when my friends Jake and Sarah proposed a weekend camping trip to Bluff Creek, I didn't hesitate to join them. Bluff Creek was nestled deep within the dense forests of Northern California, a place where towering redwoods whispered ancient secrets, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The drive was long and winding, the road narrowing as we delved deeper into the wilderness. By the time we arrived, dusk was settling in, casting elongated shadows that danced eerily among the trees. We set up our campsite near the banks of the creek, the water's gentle babble providing a soothing backdrop to our chatter. As night fell, the forest transformed. The sounds of nocturnal creatures stirred, and the moonlight filtered through the canopy, creating a patchwork of light and darkness on the forest floor. We sat around the campfire, sharing stories and recounting our favorite moments from the legendary footage. Imagine actually seeing one of those things, Jake mused, tossing another log onto the fire. Just standing there, watching us. Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. Yeah, it would be both terrifying and incredible. But honestly, I think it's just a myth. I chuckled, taking a sip of my coffee. Or maybe there's a grain of truth to it. After all, why else would there be so many sightings and footprints? As the night deepened, the conversation dwindled, replaced by the crackling of the fire and the symphony of the forest. I decided to capture some time-lapse footage of the night sky, the stars twinkling like distant eyes watching over us. Jake and Sarah dozed off, exhaustion catching up after a day of hiking. Around midnight, a sudden rustling broke the silence. I glanced up, expecting to see a nocturnal animal passing by. Instead, I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a towering figure covered in thick, dark fur. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intelligence, reflecting the firelight like burning embers. I blinked, certain my mind was playing tricks on me, but the figure remained, motionless yet somehow emanating a palpable sense of menace. I reached for my camera, my hands trembling. Jake? Sarah? Silence answered me. Panic surged through me as I realized I was alone, the others likely asleep or unaware of the presence lurking nearby. The creature took a step forward, its movement deliberate and unnervingly human. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to steady my nerves, the reality of the situation sinking in. Without warning, it let out a guttural growl, a sound that reverberated through the trees and sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the uneven ground. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to come alive with the creature's presence. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself, trying to think rationally. "It's just an animal. Maybe it's curious." But curiosity quickly turned to fear as the creature advanced, its eyes never leaving mine. I scrambled to my feet, backing away towards the creek. The ground beneath me was soft with recent snowfall, making each step a precarious effort. The creature mirrored my movements, maintaining an eerie distance that felt both deliberate and predatory. Desperate for a plan, I remembered the stories of Bluff Creek, tales of those who had encountered the creature and barely escaped with their lives. They spoke of using light or noise to deter it, methods that seemed both simple and futile against such a formidable presence. I grabbed a branch and swung it towards the creature, hoping to create enough noise to scare it off. The branch struck the ground with a loud crack, but instead of retreating, the creature let out another, louder growl. It moved faster now, the gap between us closing with alarming speed. Heart racing, I turned and ran towards the cabin we had left earlier, the comforting structure now a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. The creature was relentless, its heavy footsteps thudding against the snow-covered ground, echoing my frantic breaths. My mind raced, searching for a way to outmaneuver it, but the dense forest offered little in the way of escape. I reached the cabin and slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the latch. The creature pounded on the door, the impact sending vibrations through the wood. I backed away, desperately seeking a way to secure ourselves inside. Jake and Sarah stirred, waking up to the commotion. "What the hell is that?" Jake exclaimed, grabbing his flashlight and peering through the window. Before I could respond, the creature's silhouette was visible through the glass, its eyes burning with an intense, unyielding fury. Sarah grabbed a nearby log, preparing to defend ourselves if necessary. The tension in the cabin was palpable, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. "Stay quiet," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding on the door. Minutes felt like hours as we huddled together, the creature's presence a constant reminder of our peril. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the cabin. The door gave way, splintering under the creature's force. It entered the room, its massive frame filling the space, eyes locked onto ours with an unspoken hunger. I froze, unable to move, as the creature approached. Its hands were large and clawed, each movement calculated and deliberate. Jake and Sarah stood their ground, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. The creature let out a final, earth-shaking roar before lunging towards us. In that moment, something within me snapped. Fear transformed into a surge of adrenaline, pushing me to act. I grabbed the log Sarah was holding and swung with all my might, connecting with the creature's side. It let out a pained growl, staggering back momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, I reached for the flashlight and flung it directly into its eyes. The creature recoiled, blinded and disoriented, its growls turning into agonized howls. Taking advantage of its vulnerability, I pushed Jake and Sarah towards the door, urging them to run while I kept the creature distracted. They hesitated, torn between their instinct to flee and the fear of leaving me behind. But the creature recovered quickly, its movements regaining their ferocity. With a final burst of strength, I swung the log once more, this time striking the creature's head. It let out a deafening scream, the sound echoing through the cabin and the surrounding forest. Staggering backwards, it fell to the ground, the adrenaline draining from my body as exhaustion set in. Jake and Sarah didn't look back as they fled into the night, the sound of their footsteps fading into the distance. I collapsed to the floor, the reality of what had just happened washing over me. The creature lay still, his breathing heavy and ragged, a testament to the primal fear and survival instinct that had driven me to protect my friends. As dawn broke over Bluff Creek, the forest was eerily quiet, the aftermath of the night's terror laid bare in the morning light. I emerged from the cabin, the first rays of sun piercing through the canopy and illuminating the path back to civilization. The footprints in the mud, a mix of our hurried steps and the creature's massive ones, told a story of fear, courage, and the thin line between myth and reality. Weeks later, I returned to Bluff Creek, the memories of that night still vivid in my mind. The Patterson-Gimlin film had been confirmed, but my experience added a new layer of truth to the legend. The creature of Bluff Creek was real, a formidable presence that guarded the secrets of the redwoods with an unwavering resolve. I documented everything, sharing my story with local authorities and the wider community. Some dismissed it as an exaggerated tale, but the evidence, the deep footprints and the lingering fear in my eyes, spoke for itself. Bluff Creek remained a place of mystery and danger, a reminder that some legends are born from the shadows of the wild, where the line between the known and the unknown is as thin as a whisper in the night. If you ever find yourself wandering through the Redwood National Park, remember my story, respect the legends, heed the warnings, and tread carefully, for in the heart of the redwoods, beneath the towering giants and amidst the whispers of the past, lies a presence that watches, waits, and defends its domain with a ferocity that can turn myth into a nightmare. Story number 7. Encounter in the Redwood Forest. The Redwood National Park stood majestically under the late afternoon sun, its ancient trees piercing the sky like silent sentinels guarding secrets older than time itself. I had always been drawn to these giants, their towering presence a testament to nature's enduring strength. So, when my friends and I decided to embark on a camping trip deep into the heart of the redwoods, I felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with a hint of unease that I couldn't quite place. Our group consisted of 5 friends from college: Jake, the adventurous one; Sarah, the pragmatic planner; Mike, the jokester; Emily, the quiet observer; and me, Tom, the storyteller who thrived on weaving tales of the unknown. We had rented a spacious cabin on the outskirts of the park, surrounded by dense forest that promised both adventure and isolation. The first day passed in a blur of hiking trails and laughter, the sun filtering through the canopy in dappled patterns that danced on the forest floor. As night began to fall, we gathered around a crackling campfire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a perfect setting for tales that sent shivers down our spines. "Ever heard the legend of the Bigfoot in these woods?" Jake asked, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I chuckled, shaking my head. "You mean the same creature that supposedly leaves those massive footprints in the mud?" Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "There have been countless reports over the years. Some say it's just a myth, but others swear they've encountered something unnatural." Mike, always ready to add fuel to the fire, leaned in closer. "Imagine hearing those heavy footsteps outside your tent in the middle of the night. You'd never sleep again." Emily shivered, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Or worse, seeing those eyes watching you from the darkness." As the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive with sounds: crickets chirping, leaves rustling, and the occasional hoot of an owl. The campfire's glow flickered, casting long shadows that danced and merged with the darkness. We eventually drifted off to sleep, the comforting sounds of the wilderness lulling us into dreams. I woke up in the middle of the night, the temperature dropping suddenly. My eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness, and I sensed a presence outside my tent. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint sound of something moving through the underbrush. My heart pounded as I lay still, listening intently. "Guys, wake up," I whispered, shaking Jake awake. "I think someone or something is out there." Jake rubbed his eyes, groaning. "Calm down, Tom. It's probably just an animal." But before we could settle back into sleep, a series of thuds echoed through the forest, each one heavier and more deliberate than the last. The ground seemed to vibrate with each step, a rhythm that felt both menacing and purposeful. We sat up, the flickering shadows around us intensifying the sense of foreboding. "That's not any normal animal," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those steps, they're too big." Mike grabbed a flashlight, his usual bravado replaced by genuine fear. "Maybe we should check it out. See what's making those noises." I hesitated, the adrenaline coursing through my veins making it hard to think clearly. "Are you crazy? We don't know what's out there." Jake nodded in agreement. "Tom's right. Let's stay here. It's safer." But curiosity gnawed at me, the storyteller within yearning to uncover the truth behind the legends. As the minutes ticked by, the footsteps grew louder, closer, until they seemed to be right outside our tents. The air felt thick with tension, each breath a struggle against the mounting fear. Suddenly, a massive shadow loomed over the campsite, blocking out the moonlight. My friends and I froze, eyes wide with terror as the figure stood there, his presence overwhelming. The creature was unlike anything I'd ever seen, towering and hulking, covered in matted fur that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glowed a menacing red, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "Run!" Jake hissed, his voice breaking the paralyzing fear. We scrambled out of our tents, adrenaline propelling us forward as we fled into the dense forest. The creature let out a guttural growl, the sound reverberating through the trees like thunder. Behind us, the ground trembled with each of its heavy steps, the footprints it left in the mud massive and deep. "Over here," Mike shouted, leading us toward a narrow trail that we hoped would offer some cover. The snow crunched under our feet, muffling our movements as we raced through the trees, branches clawing at our faces and snagging our clothes. Sarah stumbled, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "It's gaining on us. We need to find somewhere to hide." I glanced back, the creature's glowing eyes fixed on us as it advanced with terrifying determination. Panic surged through me, the primal fear of being hunted taking over every rational thought. We darted down the trail, the redwoods towering above us like ancient guardians, their trunks wide enough to shield us from the creature's pursuit. Finally, we reached a small clearing where an old ranger station stood, its windows boarded up and the door hanging loosely on its hinges. Desperation fueled our actions as we pushed the door open and fled inside, slamming it shut just as the creature reached the edge of the clearing. Inside, the ranger station was dark and musty, the remnants of old supplies and forgotten memories scattered around. We huddled together, hearts pounding, as the creature's growls echoed outside. The sound of its heavy breathing seeped through the cracks in the walls, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond our temporary sanctuary. "We need to call for help," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "But our phones have no signal out here." Jake pounded on the door, his frustration palpable. "We can't stay here forever. It won't go away." Mike, ever the pragmatist, scanned the room for any possible weapons or tools that could help us defend ourselves. "We need to stay calm and think. Maybe there's something we can use to scare it off." As if on cue, the creature began to pound on the door, the force of its blows threatening to shatter the fragile barrier between us and the nightmare outside. The sound was deafening, a relentless assault that left us trembling with fear. Suddenly, a burst of static crackled through my portable radio, a forgotten piece of equipment we had brought along for emergencies. Hope flickered within me as I fiddled with the dial, trying to find a signal. "Hello? Is anyone out there?" I called out, my voice wavering. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a faint response came through. "Help us." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the radio was picking up transmissions from others, maybe even from the spirits of those who had vanished in these woods before us. The creature outside seemed to sense the shift in energy, its growls turning into agitated screeches as it began to retreat, the sound of its heavy footsteps fading into the distance. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, her eyes wide with fear and awe. I nodded, a mix of relief and dread washing over me. "We need to get out of here while we still can." Gathering our courage, we exited the ranger station, the night air biting at our skin. The forest seemed eerily silent, the usual nocturnal sounds conspicuously absent. We made our way back along the trail, the footprints in the mud now mingled with ours, a testament to the night's harrowing events. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, we stumbled out of the forest, exhausted and shaken but alive. The creature had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the memory of its terrifying presence and the deep, imprinted footprints that told a story of fear and survival. Back at our cabin, we sat in stunned silence, the gravity of what we had experienced settling in. The legend of the Redwood Bigfoot had always been a tale to scare children, but now we knew it was something far more real and terrifying. In the days that followed, we shared our story with the local authorities and fellow campers, but many dismissed it as a vivid hallucination brought on by the isolation and the eerie atmosphere of the redwoods. However, the evidence was undeniable: our large, deep footprints in the mud and the lingering fear etched into our memories. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the encounter in the redwood forest remains a defining moment in my life. I often find myself gazing into the dense woods, the towering redwoods a constant reminder of the unknown forces that dwell within. The legend of the Redwood Bigfoot took on a new meaning for me, not just a myth, but a real and terrifying presence that reminded me of nature's untamed and mysterious side. If you ever find yourself camping in the Redwood National Park, remember our story, listen to the sounds of the forest, respect its boundaries, and be aware that some legends are rooted in truths far more unsettling than mere folklore. The redwoods may offer beauty and serenity, but beneath their majestic canopies lie secrets that should remain undisturbed, guarded by creatures that are as enigmatic as they are fearsome.